There's something devastating about watching someone become what they swore they'd never be. Not because they wanted to, but because they were given no other choice. The Bad Batch weren't heroes by design. They weren't made to inspire or to lead. They were made to follow orders, to fight, and to vanish when they were no longer useful. But they didn't vanish, not right away. Instead, they tried to hold on to something that the rest of the galaxy had already given up on: hope. Hope that maybe their lives could mean more than missions, that maybe family wasn't something assigned at birth, but something fought for in blood and choice. What makes their story so haunting is how slowly it all fell apart. Not with one big betrayal or a single moment of failure, but with 1,000 little cracks that spread like spiderwebs across everything they believed in. One by one, they were tested, broken, reshaped by a war that didn't care who they were, only what they could do. And when the dust settled, they weren't standing tall with medals. They were hiding in shadows, wondering if survival was even worth it. There are few things more tragic than being engineered for a purpose, only to realize that purpose was a lie. That every mission, every order, every scar was just another layer of control masking itself as destiny. And when they tried to take that control back, they weren't rewarded, they were hunted. Because the moment they chose to think for themselves, they became threats instead of assets. They were designed to be loyal, but loyalty doesn't mean silence, and it doesn't mean obedience when the system turns cruel. They weren't just soldiers, they were brothers, and when one of them fell, the rest didn't just lose a comrade, they lost a part of themselves. Every decision they made came with weight, and every sacrifice they endured came without recognition, without gratitude, without pause. And still, they kept going, not because they had to, but because they didn't know how to be anything else. In this video, we're going to explore how the Bad Batch rose from broken beginnings into something bigger than themselves, how they were pulled apart by forces they never asked for, and how their downfall wasn't the end, but the beginning of something far more powerful. They weren't born to be heroes, but they were never meant to be villains either. From the beginning, the Bad Batch were treated like anomalies, like glitches in the system, never fully embraced by their brothers, yet still expected to serve without hesitation. Each of them was engineered to be different, stronger, smarter, more precise, but that difference was never seen as a gift, only a tool, a weapon, a convenient deviation from the standard. When the galaxy shifted, when orders turned brother against brother, the Bad Batch stood frozen in a storm that they didn't create force to question every purpose they had ever known. Their earliest missions weren't about glory, they were about proving they belonged. Fighting battles others wouldn't take, surviving situations that would have crushed any normal squad, was the only way. They knew how to be seen. But even in victory, they were still looked at sideways, judged by their scars and mutations, treated like something that needed to be controlled. Every step forward came with whispers behind their backs. Every success came with another reminder that they were expendable. They were the perfect soldiers for a war that didn't know what to do with them once peace was declared. The Clone Wars may have ended, but for them, the real battle was just beginning. Because when the war stopped, the galaxy stopped needing clones, and suddenly everything they had bled for, everything they sacrificed, became irrelevant. They didn't lose the war, they just lost their place in the world. They weren't just soldiers, they were experiments, and the cost of that label would soon become unbearable. Crosshair didn't fall, he was pushed slowly, methodically into loyalty. Became a weapon aimed back at the ones he once called brothers. He believed in order, he believed in the code, but the code betrayed him the moment it demanded silence in the face of cruelty. His choice wasn't as black and white as it seemed. It was grey, wrapped in pain, forged in manipulation, and disguised as clarity. The inhibitor chip might have lit the match, but it was abandonment, isolation, and the ache of being left behind that fueled the fire. The others couldn't save him because they were too busy trying to save themselves. Hunter carried the burden of leadership, like a weight that never let up, always calculating, always doubting, always hoping that he wasn't leading his family to their doom. Wrecker masked the chaos with laughter, but even his joy began to crack under the pressure of guilt and the trauma of battles that never truly ended. Tech kept everything buried under logic, turning his heart off just to survive and echo. The ghost of a different tragedy watched it all unfold with the eyes of someone who had already lost too much. Omega was never supposed to be part of the mission, but she became the heart of it. In her eyes, they weren't freaks or mistakes. They were family. She saw through the layers of battle scars and broken code, and reminded them of who they really were. She wasn't just a child, she was a reflection of the innocence they had all lost, and the future they never thought they deserved. Protecting her gave them a new reason to fight, not for a republic, not for a war, but for something pure, something untouched by politics and propaganda. But even that light came with a shadow. The Empire didn't see Omega as a person, they saw her as property, a puzzle piece in a genetic game they had no right to play. And the Batch were forced to watch as the same nightmare that created them began to circle her, threatening to steal away her freedom, her identity, her soul. Their missions stopped being about resistance and survival, and started becoming rescue operations against a world that refused to let them rest. Parenthood wasn't in their programming, but they adapted, not because they had to, but because love left them no choice. Hunter became the anchor, Wrecker, the shield tech, the mentor, and Echo the memory keeper, but each of them knew that no matter how hard they fought, they couldn't erase the target on Omega's back. Every step forward came with a chase, every moment of peace came with a cost, and the dream of safety felt more like a fairy tale with every passing day. They weren't just fighting for her, they were fighting for redemption, and for the chance to rewrite their ending. There's a kind of silence that follows a mission gone wrong, the kind that sits in your chest and doesn't leave. Tech's sacrifice wasn't just another name on a wall, it was a fracture, a breaking point that none of them saw coming. He had always been the one to calculate the odds, to see the angles, to find the path no one else could. And when he was gone, that map went with him. His loss wasn't dramatic or loud, it was quiet, devastating, and final, and in the void he left behind the rest of the batch was forced to carry on without a compass. Wrecker stopped laughing. Echo drifted again, trying to find meaning in a galaxy that kept asking him to relive the same pain over and over. Hunter tried to stay strong, but even he knew that something fundamental had broken. Inside them, something that no mission or victory could ever repair. Omega grew up faster than anyone deserved, and with every look she gave them, it became clearer that innocence was becoming a memory, not a state of being. As the galaxy moved on, it left no space for clones, no room for those built to die before they could ever live. The new era wasn't built for loyalty or sacrifice. It was built for compliance and fear, and the Bad Batch didn't fit in that blueprint. Their names were never etched into the history books, their sacrifices were never honored, their struggle was never sung. They became ghosts, not because they wanted to disappear, but because no one cared enough to keep them in the light. And yet in every shadow mission, in every desperate escape, they held on to something the Empire could never touch: each other. That bond was forged in chaos, but refined in love, and it was the only thing that kept them going when everything else collapsed. They didn't fight for medals, they fought for moments, for the chance to give. Omega one more sunrise without sirens in the distance. They weren't soldiers anymore, they were survivors, and in that transition they found a strange kind of freedom. Freedom to choose their battles, freedom to walk away from the ones that cost too much, freedom to write their own code, even if no one else would ever read it. But freedom came with a price, and every day they paid it with blood, with silence, with the weight of names they could never forget. They didn't disappear, they were erased, and still they refused to let that be the end. The Bad Batch were never meant to be legends, they were born to be tools, discarded once the job was done. But somewhere along the way, they became more than what was written in their DNA. More than the plan that had no place for their survival. They became brothers, fathers, protectors, rebels, a family bound not by blood, but by the choice to keep going when everything else said stop. Their fall wasn't about failure, it was about being betrayed by the very thing they gave their lives to protect. And yet their story didn't vanish, it echoed in the cracks of a broken republic, in the pain of forgotten soldiers, and in the quiet rebellion of one small girl who believed they were heroes. Omega didn't carry their legacy out of obligation, she carried it because she knew that love like theirs doesn't die, it transforms. She wasn't just the future, she was the proof that even the most flawed beginnings could lead to something beautiful. She walked forward not alone, but with every lesson, every tear, and every sacrifice etched into her heart.